views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Side by side with the many advancements happening in the borough of the Bronx, unfortunately, is the rise in opioid use, including heroin. In New York City last year, there were more than 1,300 overdose deaths, a number that has risen consistently since 2010. In the Bronx, our rate of 34 per 100,000 drug overdose deaths would be larger than all but one state. That's right, state in the nation. It is a difficult story we have documented a number of times in the 22 plus years of this program. In fact, our first time talking about how to address the ongoing heroin problem in the Bronx was a program we did on needle exchanges in January of 1995. And with opioid use historically high right now, continuing to develop new and effective ways of addressing the problem, like needle exchanges, is vital. On tonight's show, we'll talk with folks from Exponents who have been treating drugs and AIDS in innovative but very logical ways. They've treated more than 20,000 people for over 25 years. And so we talk drugs and AIDS treatment with the president and CEO of Exponents, Mr. Howard Josepher. Nice to have you, sir.
Happy to be here.
And also a Bronx man who has been an Exponent client who can talk firsthand about the horrors of drug abuse and how to fight his way out of it. It's Anthony Feliciano. Nice to have you.
How you doing, sir?
And congratulations for what you're doing. I mean, we'll start off that way. You deserve a lot of credit, and we're going to get into some of the details about your life and how you did it in just a moment. But Mr. Josepher, let's start with you. Tell me about Exponents. You have a personal history with drug use, which I guess makes you at least understand what you're dealing with a little better.
Well, I did overcome my own addiction to heroin almost 50 years ago, but the process that I did overcome it with was known as a therapeutic community. And the idea of community in treating drug addiction is one of the more powerful, effective methods, which is where people who've overcome their own addiction are helping others to overcome their addiction. So it's sort of like community, like 12-step, Alcoholics Anonymous, the therapeutic communities. These are the programs that are able to engage people who are still active, still using, because I've been there, I've lived it, then I've got a credibility with them that maybe someone else with just professional credentials may have.
In terms of that style treatment, you talked about, well, you were part of a therapeutic community, and now you've created some of those in this day and age. Yet, if we talk about maybe traditional treatment and what we hear and read about how drug abuse is dealt with, we don't hear the word therapeutic community. How come, if it was, for example, successful in your case, it's still viewed as, like I said, as something as different and innovative?
Well, I think that the method or the idea, the concept is still a very valid concept. There was a front page article in the New York Times about a jail in Kentucky using this little community method. They're showing successful outcomes. They're meeting people where they're at in jail, and they're able to turn some people around. They're showing good results. So the idea of using recovering individuals to speak, to support, to help educate those people who are still active, I think is a powerful model. I think we need a lot of different approaches, but I think the one that uses community is the one that can ignite hope in someone who is probably very desperate.
Before we bring our friend Anthony in to testify, so to speak, tell me about the biggest challenges to putting this effective community together. It's very easy to say, and social workers do this all the time. You know, we'll have a little group session and those kinds of things, and group sessions work for a lot of different issues. But this is a much stickier problem. What are the challenges to putting these kinds of groups together so that they're effective?
Well, the people that we're trying to reach are probably the most rebellious, marginalized individuals, and seemingly do not necessarily want to get off drugs. And
so that allure of it.
Well, it's powerful.
Right.
I mean, we've got this epidemic happening here. And the way we look at drug-taking behavior is they're self-medicating.
Right.
So instead of just looking at the self-medicating behavior, look underneath it. What drives it? What's going on with people, so many people in this country today, that they need to medicate themselves? Mm-hmm. So it's my understanding is a lot of pain in America. And that's where all of this opiate use and, sadly, the overdoses are coming from, trying to address that pain.
Mm-hmm. The whole notion of pain actually opens up a whole other thing, and we're going to get to that in a moment. Anthony, again, congratulations. Tell me about who you are, where you are, and who you are now and where you are now.
Well, around 2 years ago, I decided to get help. I was tired of doing substances that were destructive in my life.
You grew up in, let's be clear.
I grew up in the South Bronx.
Right.
I was born in Manhattan, Mount Sinai Hospital. Mm-hmm. My family's from Puerto Rico, but they migrated here in the 50s.
And how long were you doing drugs before you made that
30
decision?
plus years.
30 years?
Yes.
Wow. And it was essentially heroin or all of it?
No, it's all types of substances.
Right. And so what was it that made you say, you know what, enough is enough?
I lost my son's mother around 2 years ago, 2014. And I had to come to a point where he's 7 years old at the time, and my son needs a mentor. He needs someone to look up to, a role model. And I was in my mind like, I can't continue to do this because eventually he's gonna see what his dad is doing, and I didn't want to see him to see me that way. Mm-hmm. So I had to make a choice. I had to, make those decisions.
And what did you do that ultimately was effective?
I called a friend of mine that used to do drugs with me like 25 years ago. She's now a director somewhere, and she helped me. I was crying, I was in tears, and she said, "Don't worry about it, Anthony, I'm gonna help you, stay right there." I was at her mom's house, which is my neighbor, and she came, and she gave me a phone number. They picked me up, took me to a rehab in St. John's, up in Yonkers, and I decided to, from there, change my life. And here I am, 2 years later.
How did you find your way to Exponents?
Exponents, I know about Exponents since 2011. I went there, I graduated from Cycle 104. There's a program called Arrive. They were on 26th Street at the time. Mm-hmm. And I had perfect attendance. I'm pretty good because I love school, I love books.
You maybe are a little bit different from others. Mr. Josepher talked about people who still have that pull. Now, I realized there was a physical, a serious addiction, but you had made a commitment in your mind to that you were going to really try to kick this, and you had a reason to do so. What would be your advice for those who don't quite have that commitment or haven't found that commitment yet, for them to find it so they can get where you have gone? And
see, one of the things for me is that I had to say, in 5 years from now, I never grew up saying I'm going to be a drug addict. I never grew up doing that. So I said, what am I going to do in 5 years? And is what I'm doing now going to be beneficial for me to get where I want to be in 5 years, which was helping people, educating people? That's who I am. It's part of my soul. I have a strong passion for helping people. And when I answered myself, because the answers are within me. A lot of people can give suggestions, tell you this, tell you that, But at the end of the day, you have the answers
So
within
it
you.
really comes down to commitment, is what you're telling me.
Commitment, absolutely.
You know, Exponents has a wonderful video on its website and everywhere else, and I wanted to show a clip because it helps to define kind of the unique approach that you have. And in a way, we say unique, but he said, you know, he utilized it 50 years ago. But I wanted to just show a short clip from the Exponents video, which philosophically, I think, will give viewers an idea of what we're dealing with here. So, folks in the booth, let it rip.
Many organizations require a client to be abstinent before they will allow them to have treatment.
Which made no sense for someone who could not stop taking drugs to stop in order to get in to learn how to stop.
So we went at it from a non-judgmental approach, and we made it very easy for people to come into our program. We just said, come in, you're welcome.
Hence, the term we
There you go, there you get the idea. Back to you, Anthony. So you used the same methods that those folks talked about there, about building community and all those kinds of things. That's what really helped you
Absolutely,
kick it?
absolutely. Absolutely. I use all those methods. They helped me a great deal, Exponents.
What about that really was useful as opposed to you know, doing it through methadone or some other treatment?
At the end of the day, you have to like come to my desire to use drugs became less than my desire to stay clean off drugs and recover from drugs, because all I was doing was self-medicating and hurting myself. And these people here, Exponents, Mr. Josepha, they help me to do these things. They have great counselors there, and they help me a great deal.
What advice would you give to somebody who's fighting it right now?
The advice I would give someone is that you have to, if you have a family, you have to think about your family. But nothing works until you get tired. You have to hit rock bottom. Rock bottom. You have to get tired of being tired. Until you get to that point, it's never going to work.
It's going to be tough to.
It's going to be tough.
Back to this idea of pain that you had brought up, sir. It's becoming clear that people are turning to heroin. It seems incredible. We documented this on our show maybe even a couple of years ago, that they're turning to heroin because the price of pain meds is too high. And so you talked about the need to medicate yourself. In some cases, it may not be a spiritual or emotional medication. It may be because they really need some pain meds, and incredibly, they find heroin more accessible and cheaper. How big a problem is this, and how can it be dealt with? Can it be dealt with?
Well, there's no doubt that there are many, many people in physical pain, and they do need access to regular pain medication. I think that what happened some years ago is that the pharmaceutical companies sort of started to believe that they could prescribe as much pain medication as they wanted because they didn't think that it was addictive. That was the way they promoted an expansion of pain. Now, a lot of people do need pain for physical ailments, but opiates are a terrific medicine if you're depressed, or if you're in despair, or you're feeling hopeless. There is nothing like an opiate. I mean, let's tell the truth. Heroin is a fantastic drug. That's why so many people are getting strung out on it.
I got chills when you said
I know, but we got to tell the truth. And the truth is that if so many people are getting addicted, trying it once or twice, then it's delivering something that we need to understand.
You talked about building community. There's an article now about Vivitrol, if I pronounce it right, naloxone is out there. How important and effective are these chemicals to treat this problem? Or do you still say, well, that's all well and good, but we still got to build a community? Or is it something that, you know, goes in concert?
Well, I think it's good that we have different approaches to address the addiction, the pain in the community. The medical approach of providing people with a replacement opiate that you can get legally, like buprenorphine or methadone, according to the studies, have been very successful at helping people not use the street drug or not use illegally obtained drugs because they can get it legally.
But you still got to get off it, right? Ultimately.
Well, that's the thing with medication-assisted treatments. It's not about getting off it. That it is, a matter of fact, for many, a lifelong medication, as if some people who take medication for diabetes, some people are taking medication for their addiction.
Is it your goal and the goal of Exponents really to get somebody off that, or if they can get them on a trail of some of these other less harmful, so to speak, drugs, or legal drugs, then you would accept that as a way of curing them? Or are you really trying to get them clean in total?
Well, that's what I think distinguishes our work, that we came into existence at the height of the AIDS epidemic and felt that in order to help people, we couldn't say you've got to be sober or get off drugs before you come into this community-oriented program. It's a rather radical approach where you're helping people, you're teaching them skills to self-manage, you're teaching them how to cope with stress and anxiety, how to deal with their feelings in a way where they don't necessarily have to medicate. But we're not providing these kind of classes and interaction in our little community with the primatur of you've got to get off drugs. We created something called harm reduction. And this is a way of working with people that brings them into services, gives them healthy ways of taking on the challenges they have in their life, but we're not telling them they've got to sober up.
And you also accept them into the program before they could still be addicted when they get in there. You'd rather not, but I
mean, to tell you the truth, at the height of the AIDS epidemic, before we had any medications or treatment, with AIDS, before a person really got very, very sick, they had this wasting syndrome where they would lose weight. And many of my students would smoke marijuana so that they could have an appetite. And it helped them to show up to class. So the drug was a positive, not a negative. So I think we have to look at things a little bit differently and be as creative as possible in our efforts to engage. Mm-hmm. That's the key, engage.
Anthony, just out of curiosity, was there a chemical support for your efforts, or did you really do this without?
Just stop.
You just decided.
Stop.
Decided to
cold
stop.
Turkey.
And now what do you do? One of the other things I want to talk about is life skills, and you need, of course, community, and you need employment, and you need housing to replace some of the other difficult things that people have been through. So let's talk about you first.
Okay, so me. Right now, I just graduated from outpatient at Exponents, and now I'm going for my KSAC. I'm going to be a substance abuse counselor. Mm-hmm. I'm in the process of doing that. Like I said before, I have a strong passion for educating and helping others that have been in my shoes. I've walked those shoes. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I work for a place called Harlem United. I do outreach work, and I help people that have HIV and stuff like that.
Do you feel like many people talk about alcoholics, that they're always an alcoholic and one step away from going back? Or it sounds to me like, and I don't want to prejudge it, but it sounds to me like you're not going to go back, and you're not one of those that are still kind of an addict, even though you were one for so long.
Gary? I take this one day at a time. I can't say what's going to happen tomorrow, but today, I'm not going to get high. Not today. But tomorrow, I don't know. I'll wait till tomorrow. Okay. But today, I won't get high.
We're going to root and half expect for you to continue on the path that you're on. Mr. Josepher, the notion of AIDS years ago was connected one-to-one with needle drug use. Is it still the same way? And do you see as many AIDS patients and HIV positive people who are addicted as you might have in the past, or are they separate at this point?
Well, actually, I think we've done a great job over the past 25 years with bringing down new HIV infections among injecting drug users. We have gotten out sterile syringes out into the drug-using community and have brought the level of new infections down to all-time lows.
That goes back to the needle exchange
Absolutely.
program that I talked about at the top of the show.
Absolutely, but it also goes back to efforts to bring people into some kind of supportive services, and a way to do that is to engage people without judgment, engage people with respect. And instead of people being like patients, they're students. They're there to learn, and we're there to give them the tools and the skills to self-manage their lives. So it's engaging people from a perspective where you're not saying there's something wrong with them,
Right.
but here's a way to self-manage. Here's a way to deal with stress, with anxiety, with loss.
And it's interesting because you talk about those things, but you don't talk directly about the drug abuse. Let's deal with those issues, and then even healthcare for HIV and other things will come into play afterwards.
Well, we want people to understand the underlying reason for the drug-using behavior. It's self-medication. We want them to understand, okay, if it's self-medication, well, what are you medicating?
Then let's deal with that.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to talk about society at large and the way we've dealt with it. Story in the Times recently, they called it an ally in blue, that police officers are saying, and police precincts, not only in the city but in other places, are saying, you know what? It's almost like if they're not going to deal with it, we have so many problems with crimes because of these drugs, then they're coming out with a way to do it. My sense is we're asking police officers to step out of what they've been trained to do, and that these kinds of things ought to be done in other forums. And I'm appreciative, of course, to all our men and women in blue. But that was, when I read that article, I was like, that's okay, and I like that idea, but that means we haven't done a good job in general elsewhere in addressing these problems.
Well, I agree. I don't think we have done a good job, and that to do a better job, part of it is including working with the police. The fact that they could learn how to bring somebody back to life from an overdose by simply putting a spray in their nostrils. This is Narcan. This is overdose prevention. That now the cops are carrying these Narcan kits, and they can actually save lives. Also,
I'm sorry, but we're asking the police to do this. I think it's somewhat of an extraordinary thought. I mean, that's not what their job is. I mean, and again, we love our men and women in blue, but they're doing it.
Well, I don't see why it's not their job.
Okay,
I mean, that their job is maybe to stop the use of drugs, but the way we've gone about it, where it's primarily been prohibition, it's filled up prisons, millions of people, lives are destroyed, families are destroyed. So the methodology that we have been using for years, this prohibition approach, lock them up approach, it's not getting the job done. And so they're part of the issue, and they can be a big part of the solution.
This bleeds right into something that came up very recently. The Daily News did a series on heroin in the Bronx, and they talked about this place called The Hole, where I guess was well known that many people were doing heroin, and they depicted people, and I don't want to get into all the specifics of it. But as a result of that article or that series, the city went and basically swept out that area, which I guess, on some levels is a good thing because you don't have another place where people are congregating doing these drugs. But my question is, and I know a lot of people, I saw on Facebook a big dialogue about it, what has, or what happens to those people if that was kind of a safe haven? Where do those people go? And have we created yet a bigger problem rather than leaving that place there and maybe bringing some kinds of treatment or support down there? That was just my thought. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's totally understood that if you wipe out drug use in one area, it's going to pop up somewhere else.
Right. Those people didn't disappear.
Right. It's the bubble effect. You squeeze it here, and it surfaces there. The mayor said that he wanted to put people in treatment, so I don't really understand what happened that he ultimately decided to just bulldoze the whole area. My preference would have been to go in there and find a way to engage these people. Instead of driving them further into the underground, try to work with them. If they want to get high, okay, we'll not only give you clean needles, but we'll give you a safe injection facility. So now you can come to a place where you can shoot up. It's okay, nobody's going to bust you there. You could shoot up, and maybe there's a counselor here who could do a referral. Maybe there's some slides here we could teach you something.
You've used the word engage a number of times. You would use that as an opportunity to engage,
Exactly.
and that would give you a chance.
Exactly.
Before we run out of time, Anthony, hopeful, hopeless? Tell me about your view of the drug world right now, and what are the possibilities for many of our friends and neighbors in the Bronx who are so affected?
I think it's very hopeful. Hopeful because I know there's a chance. If I could do it, surely anybody else could do it. Anybody that knows my background knows where I come from. So I know that with people like me that have succeeded in recovering from drug abuse, I believe that we can make a big impact in this drug epidemic that's going on right now in society.
I think that's a wonderful way to conclude what we're doing. Exponents.org, for anybody who wants more information or wants contact, please reach out. Don't sit by yourself. And Howard Josepher and Anthony Feliciano, we thank you both for joining us tonight. Folks, we have some viewer comments. We always ask people if they have comments to send them to us. This was about last week's show on the Mill Pond Park controversy. Should they build housing at Mill Pond Park? We got this from Chris T.L. at Facebook. Must they do this? Isn't it enough that the new stadium took parkland that the community had just gotten a few years earlier? Our Bronx reps are really ticking off residents in this area. Thank you to Chris. And then from Ed GC via Facebook, no compromise. Our parklands are not for sale. And then someone named Nelson D, also on Facebook, said we need middle-class housing. A 40-story tower would look nice there. And the final one is nice and pretty concept, but someone is not aware of global warming, melting ice, no parking in the area, and a dysfunctioning subway system. What's really going on? So that is our show for tonight. And if you have questions or comments, you can also post them on Facebook or send us an email at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. We'll see you next week when our guest will be Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda. Thank you to our producer, Lindsay, and our director, who is Lisi, and all the cast of thousands around us, to our guests, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
Many organizations